So here's a question. What are the two types of commitment that you are going to need if you are going to survive the long haul of recovery? Today we talk about both of those types of commitments, and we also pop the balloon on some Disney and Beatle thinking as well.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, for 15 years, me and my wife, we taught a marriage course where we took couples through some of the skills that were necessary to build a long-term, satisfying relationship. We also did a lot of premarital counseling where we worked with couples who were planning and hoping to get, well, they were planning, they were going to get married, whether we said yes or not. But, in terms of working with couples, we actually saw what we did before couples got married, the premarital thing. If you've been through that, we saw that as pretty ineffective. We would do our best to kind of bring up or dredge up issues or relational problems, things that they needed to talk through. But as quick as we could try to bring them up or try to isolate them or identify them, the couples would say, no, we're good. We love each other. We can talk about anything. And, it was really a very non-productive exercise. And we realized, like most couples did, it's not until you get longer into a relationship when issues begin to arise that you're really ready to start talking about some of those things that are now really bugging you about the other person, or some things in your relationship that are not working as well as you thought they would work. And I remember saying to my wife, I think the only thing we're really doing in these sessions is giving couple the habit of talking to somebody else. So now they don't think they need it now, but down the road eventually, they will get to a point where they go, okay, maybe now, because we've had a bit of experience and, it wasn't all that bad, now we can talk to another couple. So that's about all I think we ever accomplished in premarital counseling. But talking about relationships and marriage, if you ask couples, what are the things you need for a successful marriage? What's the most important thing? Of course, in our Disney world, or the world of the Beatles, someone say, well, you need love. All you need is love. Well, to quote the old Larry Norman song, the Beatles said, all you need is love, and then they broke up. Now that's going way back to the 70s. But here's the point. Yeah, love is a good thing. And you'd hope that couples getting married love each other. But I think we could say that's probably pretty self-evident. But another word that comes up pretty quickly is this word commitment. Well, couples need to be committed to each other. In fact, isn't that kind of what the step of getting married signifies, that they're ready to take the next step of their commitment? Now you get some old people and they say, well, these young people, they just don't understand commitment like we do, and they take marriage way too lightly. Blah, 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 this patronizing kind of thing. But I'll just say, stats actually show right now that the highest increase in the divorce rate is not young people. It's actually couples who are entering or nearing retirement. So obviously, it's not just young people that may need to have a talk about what does commitment actually mean. So here's the point. The point is this: what is commitment really? It's this word that we all use, but I would, submit to you, we talked about this in our in our course, that there's actually two types of commitment, and they're very different, and they both need to be understood. Here's the first form, and it's usually what we think about when we think of the word commitment. It's called dedication commitment. And that is all about our desire to maintain or improve or build the quality of our relationship. So that is dedication commitment, is usually what we think about. But I want to submit to you another type of commitment, and it's called constraint commitment. Now, this is the negative side of the same commitment coin. Again, constraint commitment. So what is that? Constraint commitment comes from realizing the negative costs of walking away from our relationship, and that's called constraint commitment. For example, a couple, one of the a couple or people in the partnership might be thinking, well, maybe I should walk away from this marriage or this relationship. But then they start thinking through, well, if I walk away, then that's going to have financial implications. Or it could be, it might have, how is that going to affect my relationship with our children? Or what's the effect that that's going to have on our children? So all of that kind of calculus, that's all part of what is called constraint commitment. You say, well, that isn't very sexy at all. That's not very Disney-like. Well, it's part of commitment. There's two sides of the commitment. So the first one, let's talk about one side of the coin, the dedication. It's all about seeing what you're gaining and working towards in your relationship. That's the dedication. The constraint commitment is all about thinking about what you could lose if you walk away or that relationship is no longer in your life. Both are necessary. Dedication commitment is all about keeping your relationship as fulfilling and it becoming more fulfilling. We all want a happy marriage, and that's all about building that. But constraint commitment is all about keeping your marriage stable. So one's about fulfillment and one is about stability. So it's probably no surprise that the greater your dedication commitment and the greater your constraint commitment are, the more secure and fulfilling the relationship is. Duh. It also might explain why, for example, statistics show that couples who are married are twice as likely to stay together than couples who simply live together. There's a greater, perhaps, constraint commitment which is in place. Now, in the province, British Columbia, that I live in now, if you are together for 2 years, you're now considered to have all the same rights and responsibilities of being legally married. So maybe that partly would skew those stats going forward as well. Now, let's take the best relationships. And I don't care how wonderful the relationship is. Let me describe, after 33 years of marriage, what it's really like. On the best day, you love your partner, you're excited about it, you want a good relationship, and you continue to do the work that is a part of building your relationship. You remember your anniversary. You try to go out for a date night. You do those sorts of things. You occasionally go to the flower store. You find out what she likes, and you learn to be better in terms of affirmation of your partner. Those are all examples of great dedication commitment. However, I know this comes as a shock to some of you, but what happens when those feelings begin to wane? You go, you know what? I'm not even sure this, I even like this person. Or at times you go, you know what? And you start to think, gee, maybe I would be better off alone. Or maybe I would be better off with somebody else. Now, those are all examples of waning dedication commitment. So what happens when that begins to happen? Well, that's when constraint commitment kicks in. You go, wow, you know what? If I walked out of this relationship, then, you know what? There would be all sorts of negative things that would happen in my life. You know what? I could lose, the close relationship or access I have to my kids. Or I could lose the respect of my family. or I could, have all of a sudden all of the money and all of the things that we spent a whole lifetime building towards taken away from me. And so constraint commitment at that point plays a supporting role in keeping us in our relationships. Now, I know that's not very romantic. It wouldn't play well in a Hallmark movie or a Disney movie, but that's the two sides of commitment. Now you go, well, hold on. This is not a marriage counseling podcast. I don't think it is. This is all about recovery. So I'm going to build you a bridge now as to how those two same sides of commitment are crucial if you are going to walk out the I do of your desire to walk out your recovery. So let's just say you've begun this road to recovery and you started with all sorts of dedication, commitment. I really, really want this. And porn is getting in the way of the type of life I want, the type of relationships I want. And you know what? I want to go after this thing. I want to develop a brand new trajectory for my life. I want a clean relationship with other people. I want a clean relationship with God. And I really, really want it. Let's do this thing. That's all great. That's all good dedication, commitment. And those are not just good intentions. I really do believe that you need those things. You have to find those things, those positive motivations for yourself. It's what Matt Dobschutz talks about, finding your big why. And so just like you did those things in your marriage, like remembering anniversaries and date nights and doing all those things in recovery, you begin to do some of those same positive activities. You begin to develop vital relationships with other men. You learn to begin to call men or go to group on a regular basis. You begin to really perhaps work on developing your spiritual strength and connection with God. And all of those are a part of you walking out your dedication, commitment to this lifestyle away from porn and towards the life and relationships you've always dreamed of. You are committed to this path, which is great. In fact, one of the things that's age-old marriage advice, you meet a couple and they describe themselves as falling out of love. One of the old things that the old marriage experts say, well, go back and do the same things you did when you were in love. And if you begin to focus on those things, you very likely may find yourself falling back into love. Now, that can sound a little bit simplistic, but you get the idea. Well, I would say the same thing in recovery. If you find that your recovery is going wobbly, like we talked about in an earlier podcast, then go back and do the very things you did when your recovery was strong, and you will find that sense of strength in your recovery returning. However, just like we said you need constraint commitment in a human relationship to keep your relationship stable, so you need that in your recovery relationship with yourself. What do I mean by that? Well, constraint commitments means that you are going back and regularly reminding yourself of the negative consequences of your return to your old behaviors. Now, why you walked away from porn probably varies. It's likely that you had some sort of outside intervention. You might have, saw that you were going to lose a relationship with a girlfriend or potentially lose that. Or your wife was saying, I'm done with this. This cannot go on if you've been discovered. And you might have started because of somebody else's motives. But at some point, my hope is that you developed your own internal motives. But as you go along, you can find your commitment to this whole thing beginning to wane. Your dedication commitment begins to suffer or slow down. That's where constraint commitment comes in. You start to say, okay, well, I am in this relationship with, say I'm in a new relationship with this woman. I could lose the trust and respect of this person by returning back to porn. Or let's say you have young children in the picture. You say, you know what? I may lose the access or the relationship with my kids if I continue this or allow this back into my life. Or you say, you know what? My kids are older. I'm going to lose the respect or esteem in their eyes when they find out why mom and dad are no longer together. Or it could be, you know what? I could lose my job. Or it could be, you know what, again, I could lose all of the net income that we've built as a couple. I could lose the keys to my house. I could end up living in a dark and dingy basement suite from where I am right now. Think about, people talk about, well, counseling is expensive. Think about having your entire net worth divided by 2 or more, depending on how bad or how good your wife's divorce lawyer is. All of that is an example of constraint commitment. When you think of going back to your old ways, you start and you bring that back to your thinking. That helps you through those wobbly days. Why do we need that? Because the mind is capable of tremendous self-deception. I don't care how long you've been in recovery. I'm amazed even in my own journey how I start thinking, you know what? Maybe I can go back and have just a little bit. It's like the alcoholic that goes, you know what? Maybe if I go back and drink just a little bit of light beer, I can handle this. This will be okay. Which you always know where that ends up. So the reality is, whenever we get to a point where we start to tell ourselves those lies, we have to drink from the well of constraint commitment. You see, if we don't, what will happen is, let's say our wife, for example, will have to turn up the volume to make us get it. It's much better when we can learn to turn up the volume on ourselves and say, if I go down this road, this is where it very likely is going to end up. One of the reasons why I think being in a group is so important is as you hear the stories of what other men are going through. I'm not saying this as, a disaster movie, but I listen to the stories of other men as well. It reminds me of what my story could very easily be like, but for the grace of God. There's nothing, I used to tell my kids, there's nothing like vicarious learning. I try to learn vicariously as much as possible to avoid as much pain as possible as well. So let me just conclude by this. When it comes to your recovery, yes, find all of the dedication, commitment you can. All of those great, wonderful reasons why you are in this journey of recovery. Continue to stoke the fire of those. Continue to pursue those to become a better person. Find your inner why and continue to work on that. But let me say, when you find yourself losing focus or your mind begins to play tricks on you, you also need to drink from the well of constraint commitment before you lose focus and it takes you off the path. So, towards next time, God bless you. It's great to have you with us here. I encourage you, if you're listening to this as a podcast, I encourage you to hit subscribe. Or if you're listening to this on my YouTube channel, which is under my name, Vern Tomke, I encourage you to also subscribe. We'd love to have you join the website. You can go to bandofbrothers.care. You can download some great materials on wrestling with porn at different times and seasons of your life. Some great resources there, bandofbrothers.care. And I also want to say I love connecting with men and finding out if there's things that I can do to help. You can get a hold of me at bandofbrothers@shaw.ca. Love to hear from you. God bless you. We'll see you next time.